Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Command Q, the podcast for quitters. We're your hosts. I'm John Pelfrey.
And I'm Maari Casey.
And if you roll your eyes anytime you hear the phrase, chase your dreams, this episode is for you. For most of us, the dream is pretty simple. Find something you love to do that you're really good at and get paid to do it. As universal as this is, according to a 2024 survey by Pew Research, only about half of us like our jobs. Something must be keeping us from moving forward and towards the reality and where we really want to be. Here today to help us solve that mystery is sales expert and the man behind Audience Labs Consulting, Chris Leithe.
I really feel like the whole world would be better off if we were all taking time to be curious about various situations. What I think is most interesting about that is if you think about what the most important thing is from a leadership situation, you're CEO of this really cool company. What's the important skill to develop beyond leadership skills and traits? It's to build your intuition. In order to do that, you have to first say, this is what I think is going to happen if I do this interaction or go with this strategy. And the second thing is you need to then go back when that thing happens and see, were you right or not? And then there's this question as to, okay, I thought this was going to happen. This actually happened. What data or insight was I missing that led me to think that this was going to be the outcome? And then your intuition gets a little bit better and it gets to a point where it's almost like you've got this crystal ball, but really what's happened is you've learned how to ask the right questions. You've learned the right details to pay attention to. And eventually you're like, okay, I really think this is going to happen. And this is why. And you get that good gut read on most of your strategy decisions that you're going to make as a founder, as a leader.
So that actually leads us really well into our topic today, which is quit talking yourself out of your calling. When I think about the things that I've thought were my calling in life or the thing that I'm supposed to do right now, I'm not one of those people that believes you have a lifelong calling and that's the thing you do forever and ever. I'm someone that believes that your calling changes as you learn and you grow and whatever. But how does this intuition piece you're talking about fit into finding that calling and then sticking with it? I think you're hitting a nerve here where I go, yeah, if you trust your gut and you feel like there's an intuitive push or drive, that I should trust that.
Wow. What a cool question. So when we're thinking about how does intuition play with finding your calling and leaning into your calling, to me, it first starts with self-knowledge. One of the most important things we can all do as humans is get to know ourselves as deeply as possible. You're seeing this on social media. Everybody's talking about going to therapists these days and working with coaches and all this kind of stuff. And there's a real superpower when you get to know yourself, because then you start to figure out, wow, what really matters to me? And what are the things that light me up and give me energy and true joy? When you find those things that give you energy and true joy, you can start to lean into them. Like you start getting closer to your calling per se, or your multitude of callings. To your point, I don't think there's just one calling, but as you start to get to know yourself better, you start to feel your way into that. The hardest part about that is not getting bogged down by what society thinks is important. I need to make $1 million, or I need to have this big house, or society's telling me that I need 17 children, or whatever the case is that they're saying.
Don't follow that pathway.
Yeah, don't do that. Whatever they're saying at the moment. And you're like, I guess that's what everybody is saying I should do. Maybe I should do that. Nothing will derail you faster from your calling than that. And so part of that self-knowledge piece is like listening to what are the things that actually matter to me versus what all this noise is saying outside of me. And I think that really is the element of intuition that we're talking about.
And it takes such a level of reprogramming that has to happen. And then also I think it's happening just societally as a whole, because I think people are thinking about this at a younger age versus like where John and I were, where it's like when you hit 45, 50, you're like, oh crap, I built this amazing law career. I hate law or whatever. And then we all wake up and we're like, crap, what am I going to do now? But I think people are doing that a lot earlier. The interesting thing is you talk to a lot of students and a lot of people in their 20s, is that so much of what we're brought up in, as far as like the education system, is very much like, you tell me to go to school and to do this and to get grades and take this class and do this. And it's all instruction based. And then I perform versus like you get it. I say you get into your parents take you from the passenger seat to the driver's seat when they send you off to college. And they're like, here's the keys, good luck. But no one's taught you how to drive or where you want to go. Where do you even want to be in a car? And so there is this real big like identity crisis and process that happens when you're all of a sudden having to make a career decision or a life decision, because you're like, I have to make the next right choice. Otherwise the car is derailed and everything's ruined, because the whole process of linear thinking has been like ingrained into you from kindergarten. So it's really tough.
What a cool insight. One of the most popular classes at Stanford used to be this class called Designing Your Life. And you probably have heard about it. There's a book about it, a workbook that goes along with it. The whole idea of this book was tracking and looking at what are the things that light you up? What are the things that give you energy? What are the things that zap energy from you? What do you find yourself spending the most time on? What's giving you anxiety? What's giving you joy? And paying attention to those things. We're just not taught to really pay attention to it. We're taught to go get the A, right? Go win the game. We're taught to do. And I know, Maari, you're an athlete and you've got that background. And what do we start doing things for? We start doing things for the pat on the head. Good job. You did it. You brought home the A. You made the winning shot, like whatever the case may be. And how confusing is that when you're like, I like playing the guitar, and you're like, class, how are you going to make money doing that? And you're like, I didn't think I needed to make money to play the guitar. I just love playing the guitar. Do I have to make money doing that? And like all of a sudden, all this confusing stuff is happening that we've been ingrained, to your point, Mario, of learning since we were little kids and being in this structured thing.
Mm-hmm.
There is something to this idea of like all your passions have to have outcomes, and those outcomes have to be monetarily based.
Uh-huh.
And I'm not sure that's true. People, to me, do need hobbies that aren't outcome based and aren't monetary based. And they do help you to find a passion or a calling, just the tinkering around, exploring things that make you uncomfortable. And then eventually that becomes a passion. I have a friend who used to play a lot of tennis with me, and now he's a very passionate rock climber. The only reason he got into rock climbing was because his back started hurting. He couldn't play tennis anymore. He's super passionate about one. And then this obstacle came along in his life. None of this has to do with his day job, right? None of this has to do with what he does for a living and how he makes his money. But he switched over to rock climbing, and now that's his full passion. If you sit down and talk to him, you could talk to him for 2 hours. He'll never mention his job, but he will talk to you about all the places he's climbed rocks.
Okay. So can I pick a fight with you for a second?
Right. Sure.
I'm asking permission, right? This is consent's important. Okay. So here we go. You used two different words. You used hobby and you used passion. Okay. All right. You've got 3 guitars on your wall there. You've got amps. You've been playing guitar forever. I called that, oh, that's such a nice hobby that you have there. Like, what would that evoke in you? It's like a hobby is something that you do when you're bored or take up time or something like that. I would argue that the fact that you have 3 guitars on your wall and you've got this really cool amp next to you and that you've been playing for years, like that is not a hobby. That is a bad word if I were to call that a hobby. It doesn't do justice to what you're actually passionate about. Just like your friend who you're talking about has now got this passion of rock climbing. If you called that a hobby to him, you'd be like, bro, it's not a hobby. This is my life, right? And so I think also with this whole calling thing and this intuition is we've got to honor them with the right words. And we've got to make sure that we're doing and calling it the thing that it really is and honoring the meaning of that thing to us, because I love music. I write music. I write poetry. And it irks me every time I hear somebody's like, oh, that's such a nice hobby to have. I'm like, no, this is a counter hobby. These are like my children. I don't have kids. These are my kids. It's such an important thing to honor those things and to really honor the things that are your calling, the things that you are passionate about.
Yeah. So how do we take that passion trust our intuition, start to pull that in and go, oh, I see an opportunity here.
Class.
Maybe I'm interested in making a living out of my passion, because I tried that once and it wasn't for me.
So you experimented with it.
I went to college in Nashville, Tennessee. I played in bars 4 or 5 nights a week. I did the songwriter showcases and all the things. I had lots of friends who that's what they needed to do in their life. It was the thing that they were not just skilled at, but they were far more passionate than I was about it. And they pursued it because to them, it was their calling. For me, it was like, I have a business degree and I have other things that I'm interested in as well. I'll go work at a technology startup out of college, which is what I did. And that was a big separator for me in realizing that I really enjoy making music. My favorite thing in the world is to go into somebody's basement for hours and play music and have a good time. But the days of me thinking that I'm going to pay my bills by writing the next number one song are long gone.
And do you see how easy it is to think that the thing you're passionate about also has to be the thing that makes you money, brings you this income? I think that is one of the core fundamental problems that we have. Again, let's go back to the fact that we are vast. We contain multitudes. I really love people, psychology, business. I'm very passionate about it. I don't know whether or not that's technically my calling. I do believe that people are my calling, and the whatever way I interact with those people is up to me. I think fundamentally for us, I can turn that into something that I also can make a living at. Now, on the other hand, like you're talking about, I also like poetry. I also like music. I'm not thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to put this into a poetry book and sell it and build a whole business around it just because me putting it out into the universe is enough. And so there's callings. The point I'm trying to make is maybe there are callings that you can build a financial life around. And then there are those that are meant to be kept sacred, separate, and not tainted by the money-making side of things.
I love that you called your calling people. The reason for that is when your calling is something like helping people maximize who they are or helping people to build a business or whatever it is, your calling is built around a cause that is more than just a thing or a passion or a curiosity. You're, in my mind, because I've known you before, passionate about seeing people have good outcomes.
Yes.
It's about, you're passionate about people, but you want to help people, businesses, companies to create good outcomes that are beneficial for your clients, for you, for your customer, all the way up and down. But being passionate about people centers that calling so that when you go into your business mind, that's still your primary focus.
Yeah.
Is that
a huge part of it? The people thing is the through line. And I'd say one level even deeper, I'm really passionate about personal and professional growth and development. When I was building these big sales teams and I had a team of 60 people working for me, that was the thing that I was offering them. If you come work for me, we will focus on personal and professional growth and development. I love the transformational aspect of this journey that we're on. I've gone through a lot of transformations myself, and I love it when other people are going through it too. And yeah, to your point, I do love that human element and I love the transformational element of that. I want to provide experiences to the people that work for me, work with me, that I consult for. I want them to have those similar experiences.
I think this is going to be a very sales strategy kind of thing. So you'll probably just remember these kind of scenarios, but it's like when someone's trying to sell a vacuum cleaner and you're talking to engineers who create it and they're like, this vacuum cleaner, it has the suction and the cord is short and what it's shiny and all the buttons. And you're like, but that's not what it is. It's like, I'm giving you back 15 minutes of your day because this cleans really effectively. When we work with people who are just starting out a lot of times in freelance or building their business, they're like, I write headlines, like, or I like to do this one thing. That we try to get them to back up and be like, but what is the broader sensibility? That's a deliverable of your passion, but that's just one deliverable. What else can you do around the idea of, I love to communicate? Okay, and that's a broader platform to build from because you might love to communicate. And then this part of your life, it's writing headlines. And then in this part of your life, it's writing scripts or speeches. And this part of your life, it's writing screenplays. So it's like trying to get people to back up from the deliverable, like tactical functions of their passion into what's the broader through line. I want to help people create their personal development. That's a broader thing throughout your life. As that changes, you can bring other things in. So it makes it a little easier to pivot.
Totally agree with that. What you're talking about, using some of the language that I like to use, is what's the so what of the thing that you do? And if you continue to ask yourself, so what? I like to write headlines for people. So what? I like to do that because it helps my clients, businesses get more customers. And you're like, so what? It helps them get more customers. If they're get more customers, then they're feel good and they're successful and they're able to spend more time with their family or do the things that they want to do. And you start to realize like, oh, I'm in this business of inspiration, of helping people free themselves out of this cage that they're living in. And I do that through writing headlines in this case. I think it's super cool that you bring that up. A lot of people don't think that way.
What are some ways we tend to romanticize dream chasing?
Okay.
Chasing a dream. I'm going to go in a slightly different direction here, but what are some ways to pursue your calling versus like diving into the world without a safety net? Can you ease into it? I guess is the question. Or is this something that like you find your calling and it's best to just go all in?
All right.
Are you a diver, Chris? You're a diver, aren't you?
Yeah. Don't ask me.
All right. I've got a foot firmly planted on earth and I do have a bit of woo. The woo side of me says the universe will present you with opportunities and it's your job to say yes or no to them. Sometimes the universe gives us things to say yes to, and sometimes it gives us things to say no to, and it's testing whether or not we're going to make the right choice. Okay. So fundamentally, I believe those opportunities are there. They will be presented to us in terms of, do you jump in with 2 feet or not? I am a huge fan of testing, experimenting, getting in a thoughtful and deliberate way. So for instance, I, several years ago, had decided that I really want to learn how to sing. Something in me was like, this would be fun. This would be an interesting thing to try. And so I was talking about it one day in the kitchen at work. And it just so happens that one of the women in the room that day were like, oh, I'm a voice teacher. And so I was like, all right, let's do this. So I started taking some lessons. Now I didn't quit my job and decide if I was going to be a singer. And I was like, well, let me see if I actually like this. I got further and further into it. And then I got another teacher later on and deepened that skill. And then started playing at open mics to see like, how do I like that? And realize like, I'm actually pretty freaking scared of standing up and singing in front of people. But it wasn't like a scared because I'm doing the wrong thing. It was a scared because I have some things to work on personally about being up in front of a large crowd and having this fear. My general belief is, test your way into it. See where you can volunteer or get a flavor of something first and work your way into it. And then decide, do I need to go full time or not? It's kind of like the whole lean startup idea that was really popular like 15 years ago, still popular, but it reminds me of that.
Yeah. I love the story of you talking about getting up on stage because I can relate to that. I grew up in a church world, and so I get used to standing in front of people. But there were certainly times when I was very intimidated, very scared. It doesn't matter when you get up in front of people. Sometimes it comes on very unexpectedly in places where you wouldn't think as well. But you show up. I used to get more nervous for 5 people in a room than for 500 people. More people, the better for me. But this idea of pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone as a way to explore your calling, doing something that feels really awkward or scary as a test for this. Because when you talked about the universe, my first question was, how do I know if the universe wants me to say yes or no? And I think part of it is I don't know unless I try.
Yeah.
Right?
Great question. That really is the multi-million-dollar question. Like, do I say yes to this or do I say no to this? The universe is putting the same person in front of me again. do I say yes to this person? Or is it like, have you learned the lesson? Are you done? Or do we need to do this again? And you're like, let's do it again. I've been that guy many times. I love question that insight. What is it about a situation that signifies whether or not I should say yes or no? And that takes us back to our intuition question. And I think if you start to listen really closely, you'll think about, does this thing actually excite you? Mm-hmm. And if the thing excites you, if behind the fear and all of this, you're imagining like you're Bill Murray on stage in the movie Groundhog Day, which is one of my favorite movies. By the end of that movie, he's jamming out on the piano and killing it. If you're thinking like, man, that would be really cool, that's probably a good sign. The fear is not something that's telling you to say no. It's something you need to work through to get to a point where you can fully say yes. So that's my general take. My other take is I've worked with this incredible therapist for a very long time. And one of his things that he said to me is you can't truly say yes to something until you learn how to say no. Some of us are no people. I'm a yes person. So some of us have to build that muscle to say no and really mean it and stick to it so that when we say yes, not only do other people know that we mean it, but we know we mean it. It's important to know that you mean yes when you say yes.
I'm also a yes person. Surprise. And that is a muscle. The no muscle is one I'm still really working hard on. But I think that's one of the things we talked about too with this is being uncomfortable with fear and being uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think if you are pursuing your calling, which a lot of times can mean everybody else around you is going, why did Chris quit doing that? He was doing all this. Like, why did Maari quit this awesome job? She could wear jeans to work every day and take her dog to the office. Like she's lost
her 1K and like
she's lost her freaking mind. What's happening? Yeah. Because you have to have a strong no and a strong sense of self because you're going to have to go through times where it's hard and you could always go back. And part of you is going, I could always go back. So you need to have that strong foundation of, but I said no, and here's why. Because I'm saying yes to this future opportunity. Because there's those times when you're going through pursuing your calling or building your business when the days just suck and it's a hard day and they don't go away. It doesn't just automatically become blissful and wonderful. You have to be really confident. Like I've said yes to this because I want it. Because when those days are really hard, it's so easy to be like, but I could go back to the 401k and the thing over here and it would be so much easier. So I think that's a good thing to point at. Be really confident. Honestly, I always say it out loud. Say, I am saying no to this because I don't really want to work here. I talked to a person last week and he was like, I was going to interview at a job. And I was like, I could tell with him, I was like, you're in that job and that job was a great opportunity. But when they ask you the question, why do you want to work here? Your inside person said, like, that is a must. I don't want to work here because I want to work for myself or I want to build this other thing.
Yeah.
And he was like, that's that voice that you have to be able to listen to. Otherwise, you're constantly finding the two sides of yourselves.
Brilliant. Yeah. I see that in so many people. We all have friends like that are getting the big paycheck, that have the golden handcuffs. They're like, I'm going to quit. This quarter is going to be the quarter that I'm quitting. I'm going to do the thing I want. And there's part of me that's, we'll see. You can tell who's stuck in that. And maybe they need to be. That's a part of their journey. There's no judgment there, but you can see very clearly that there's this battle going on inside as to, do I stay for the money? Do I leave to do this other thing? Am I at the right place and family situation and financial situation where I can do that? Because not everybody can do that. We got to be real honest about that. Not everybody can make those decisions and be okay with it.
One of the things that Maari and I talk about is this idea that if you say yes to something, then you're saying no to something else. And so there's consequences when we say yes or when we say no on the other side. And that's, to me, a really good way to evaluate. If I say yes to this, what am I giving up? What can I absolutely not do if I say yes? What are the options that I lose? Am I willing to lose those options or not? In the case of, I'm going to leave my 401k and my good healthcare and all that, I've done that. I think all of us have done that on this call. And so obviously, when you leave to go start your own thing, you are saying no to that health insurance paid for by your employer, that you're saying no to your 401k contributions, the golden handcuffs, the safety net of it all. And there certainly are a lot of naysayers out there that will say, what you look at everything that you're giving up. And then the other side is, if you feel that you're saying yes, absolutely to that, I never saw it as giving anything up. I saw it as the opportunity to gain. To gain either freedom in my scheduling, gain new skills, or the opportunity to just broaden my horizons, whatever it was. At the time, I was starting an art gallery, and I was trying to gain a new community. We started it in the middle of 2009, the worst possible time you could start an art gallery in East Durham. And we made it. We survived for 5 years.
The coolest cat in town is on this podcast right now, Maari. Like, how are we on this call right now?
I know. I feel cooler just hanging.
You're one of the cool cats too. I don't even know how I'm here, but like art galleries, dude. Have you seen my walls? We need some help.
I can help you out.
Connections.
My wife is a painter.
That's
her painting.
Beautiful. Yeah.
When we first met, I was a struggling musician and she was a struggling artist. One of us had to get a job to pay the bills. So I went to work for a startup company, but it was always in our head, one day we want to have an art gallery. So the opportunity presented itself, and I gave up the 401k and I gave up all this stuff, and I was like, let's do it. And then 3 or 4 weeks later, while I was serving out the end of my job, last 30 days, I get 30 days notice. And in the middle of that is when the stock market crashed in 2008. And I thought to myself, is this the right time to be doing this? They'd probably let me stay if I just said, I've changed my mind. But then again, I would look like such a jerk if I stayed after saying I was leaving. I had a 1-year-old son. At the end of the day, that little voice that Maari was talking about, that one, like, do you still want to be here? That voice kept saying, quit. Every morning I'd wake up and in the shower, and that's all I could hear in my head was like, it's time to quit. And didn't lose my house. It's still here.
The rest, one thing that keeps coming up that I want to address, I've been hearing this one thing over and over again with the clients that I've been consulting. And it has to do with specifically those folks that are in middle management roles. So your VPs of sales or business development or whatever else. And this thing that I keep hearing is, I can't leave because I feel this loyalty to my company, to the people that I work with. And I truly believe that comes from a beautiful place. Is that in a crunch, that company is not going to think twice about laying you off. They're not going to bat an eye. Your boss may feel really bad and nervous about it and whatever, and it might tear them up, or they'll say that or whatever. But at the end of the day, if they need to do it, they will do it. There is no loyalty here. And so when I hear that's one of the big things that's holding people back from going after their calling or whatnot, I want to remove this veil from your eyes and see the truth of the situation. And the truth is, you're the only one feeling that. And so don't let that keep you from doing what you know is right in your soul to do, because it is your life to live. It is out there life to live.
Yeah. It's interesting that people are still feeling that way, because I feel like that is more from John and my generation and up. Like our parents, my dad worked at the same company until he retired. And not that I feel like loyalty is gone, but I have an article I wrote about that. It's called "Work is Not Your Family. Work is not your religion. Work is not your identity." You know, the interesting thing is pursuing your own calling and finding your own way. And your definition of work is like, work is you. What you want to do is what you want to do. And that changes, and it doesn't need to be associated with the company for a period of time if that's serving you and it's serving them and it's a good relationship exchange. But it's like, when it's not serving you, it's time to move on. And I think people see a lot of times when they get connected to a company, it's like they're in it forever, whether or not it's serving them. Once it's not working anymore, it's time to move on. And doesn't need to be a bad thing. When I left my job, I tried to make them like the evil stepmother. They did this to me and they did this to me. And it's like, I've got to get out of this talk. And it's okay. Some people have toxic work relationships. Sometimes you're just done and that relationship is over and it's time to move on. And it doesn't need to be judgment associated with it. But when you stay at a place that's not serving you anymore, it's not good for you.
No. Let's say that you need to do the mental gymnastics real quick to make yourself feel good about it if you're in this situation and you are not living your calling. What's the chances that you are actually doing 100% of your best in that job? Probably pretty small. If that's the case, here's the mental jujitsu. You can say, me staying in this job is actually preventing this employer from having somebody who is 100% both feet in, that's going to benefit from being here and learning and engaging in all these work activities. I'm just preventing them from hiring that next person for themselves.
Ooh, I like that.
There we go.
And actually, I'm helping you get me out of here.
Whatever you need to do, whatever you need to do to get through the mental block of this thing, it's either you're helping yourself or you're helping them. Let's go there.
I feel like there's a level of just getting okay with also being uncomfortable in those situations of leaving. A lot of us have never quit or left something. I feel like John and I always talk about how we're really good at quitting now. Like we're like professional quitters. Like it's fine, we're out of here. But there's a level people pleasing that people get stuck into. And a lot of times people who are really successful are people pleasers because they're making it work for other people. They have a hard time being uncomfortable saying, I'm out of here because it's not working anymore. I'm one of them. I'm also a people pleaser. So.
I'm absolutely in that camp. I'm a recovering people pleaser for sure.
So I'm the only no person on this call. That's really funny. I'm the no first guy.
Good.
And then you're going to sell me on the yes. That's why Maari and I make a good team. She comes up with ideas and I'm like, no. And then she talks to me. And then she's like, but I really want to, I think it makes sense this way. And I'm like, okay, all right, I see it.
You're two sharp objects sharpening each other. So saying no and you saying yes, Maari, that come together and make the idea better because you have to try harder to sell John on the idea. John is asking to be sold on the thing and has to get to a point where he's okay, fine. You're both honest about it and willing to be convinced one way or another. And that makes a beautiful team.
So heading down our questions, we're getting close to the bottom here. It's funny. I haven't had to ask a lot of these questions. They've just come up.
How that works.
But this is one that I really do want to ask. And it's a personal question directed at you. How has pursuing your calling changed your relationship with work?
John, I have no idea. I'm
curious about when you started to dig into it. I can go a little farther. When you started to follow your passion, leave that 401k, do all of that, did your perspective shift at all?
That is a must.
Once you found that calling, and then how do you find that passion every day?
Yeah, it's an important question. It's such a hard question to answer because I've always liked the work that I have been doing. In my entire career, I've been on the creative, customer-facing side of things. Even though I'm on the sales side, a lot of what I did had to do with helping with the direction of products because I'm talking to customers all day long and thinking, okay, if I was in their shoes, what would I want here? And that would inform a lot of product strategy and growth and development. So my calling really has been in this space of people and creativity. And I've actually, in my career, felt like I've done a good job of that, even in my own, where I've been employed type businesses. Mm-hmm. And what truly drove me was I finally woke up one day and I was like, you know what? I want to work for people that are inspired, that care about personal and professional growth and development like I do. And they are good humans that want to make a big impact in the world. It was really at that moment I decided if I'm going to live that life, I'm going to have to build it myself. And I'm going to have to construct it bolt by bolt and not be a passenger in my life, but a driver in my life. That was really the key switch for me. And so when you start asking, like, how does starting to pursue your drive, your desires, your call, whatever, impact your relationship with work, you start to realize, do you want to be the driver or do you want to be a passenger? And again, no judgment. Some people love to be the passenger and are meant for that role. Great. Some people are meant to be the driver. Great. We need both because if everybody's driving, there's not enough seats on the car in that way. So for me, It was waking up, realizing that I wanted to create this. And then I had to go out and find these amazing people that I work with today, Aaron Dinnan, Aaron Limpany, Kate Rose, and all of these wonderful customers that we have as well, because we've had to say no to some customers just because they weren't going to be a good fit. And I started to say, I want to design my life in such a way that I enjoy the people I'm working with and I'm working for. And so that was really how I started to change my relationship with work. And again, I'm in a lucky place. I can do that. I have that ability. I have that set up. So I'm really grateful for that. That really is where I think the call changes the relationship with work. The funny thing is, I probably on average before I left was working maybe 10-hour days. I know there's a lot of people that work a lot more than that. I know there's a lot of people that work a lot less than that. And when I took that step out and started to do my own thing, it took me about 1.5 to 2 years, but I was able to get to a point where I was working half as much time and making more money than I had ever made in my entire career. It took me a while to get there, but it happened. And so what's funny is like you start to pursue these things. And if you do it well and you do it intentionally and you do it thoughtfully, I had a lot of people that supported me along this route, a lot of friends, a lot of family who gave me advice and who were there for me when I was going through tough times and doubting myself. I had this group of people that were there, but eventually that led to all of the success. So I know you work with a lot of freelancers and a lot of people who are trying to figure this out for themselves. If you do it methodically and you keep that beginner's mindset as you're going about it, and you test and you ask questions and you seek out expert advice and you do it from a place of humility and wanting to learn, you will figure something out that will work for you eventually.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. It's a great story to tell that it took you a couple of years too, because a lot of times people, when they start to freelance or build a business, they'll be like, it's going to happen overnight. And if it doesn't, then there's panic and retreat back. And the truth is, you're a startup. No startup expects to be successful day one. A lot of them aren't successful for years. And so I always tell them, like, you have to build this, I would say, build a team around you. That's like your cheerleader and your Yoda, all the people you need when you hit those points, and just build that plan and say, in 6 months, I'm going to get to this revenue point. In a year, I'm going to get to here, and make those goals realistic. Even though you're one person, you are going to build that startup process and go through all those things. You got to build yourself a runway. You got to prepare to do that, because it makes such a difference. Otherwise, you're panicking. You're taking on all the jobs you really don't want to.
Maari, that is genius. First of all, I want to exclamation point that. Find your cheerleader, find your Yoda. Love that. If you're listening to this, write that down. So important. I have those characters in my support system as well. And I think it's important to know I started out also with what we're not going to say the word here, but an FU fund that I saved up for a rainy day if I ever needed to like walk and say, okay, I'm not in alignment with this company, its values, whatever they're doing. I had an idea of how much runway I wanted to have in order to feel safe doing that. And that was to just live my current status of life with being able to do the things that I was currently doing. And I think I had planned enough for 1.5 or 2 years of that, where I could have just had straight burn. I was paying for my own health insurance, doing all that kind of stuff. I set goals for the year. And my first goal was try to break even. Okay. And that was just for home expenses. So I could live like net that year with the same amount in the bank that I had going into it, just level set. The next year was to try to double that. And so I had these goals, I had this support system, and I had saved up enough to do that safe. That's what I needed. Saving up 1 year, 2 years, etc., might not be what everybody else needs. Okay. They might need more. They might need less. So you got to figure out what is that thing for you that would allow you to feel safe. And then also, what are the goals you need to hit in order to feel safe? What are those milestones? Because as we know as salespeople and entrepreneurs, sometimes it rains, sometimes it pours. Sometimes you're walking through the desert and you're just dying for some water. If you're doing the work If you're putting out what you're doing and you're talking about it online with people, et cetera, and you're prospecting, that is going to lead to deals coming in. If you're not doing those things, you're going to be pretty thirsty and it's going to look like a big old up and down graph and your hair is probably going to start falling out.
And we don't want that.
No, we don't want people to lose their hair, especially not your hair.
You have gray hair.
It's beautiful.
Thank you, John. That's why I came.
So we're wrapping this up just a little bit. And at the end of these podcasts, we always ask a few questions. We call it our lightning round, just some short little fun things to bring things to a close. The first one is, you've already said that you do open mic nights. You also do a lot of public speaking, or you have done it in the past. Is it really a good idea to picture the audience in their underwear?
Absolutely not. Very just do it.
Don't do it.
Don't do it.
What do you do? What's your stage fright solution?
Okay. So we're in this era of positive psychology right now. A lot of people are saying, be kind to your fear. And
that is a must.
Kindness is the friend that's reminding you to prepare. There's an element of truth to that. Yes. Preparation will decrease fear. But then there is also the fear that you need to tell to shut the hell up. Say, we're not doing this again. And we're getting on stage. You've practiced, you've prepped, and this is all neuroses and you need to shut up. So I've gotten to a point now where that's my battle. My battle is saying, shut up, get on that stage and own it. And you know how to do this. Go.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to do you and figure out what are your feet telling you. But for me, that's where I'm at now. I'm like, I'm not playing nice guy to my fear anymore. To that.
I like that. I like that a lot. I can relate in several ways. All right. So the next one, what sales test makes you cringe the hardest? And by this, we mean, give me your elevator pitch or sell me this stapler.
Sell me your pen or whatever. Yeah.
Sell me your pen.
What makes you cringe the hardest?
Yeah, that one definitely. Like, why? Sell me your pen. No, thank you. I'm a huge fan of there's this one that you can look up. I think I've done a video on this before. It's called the elevator problem. And it is probably one of my favorite. It really takes a book out of more of the consulting world where you're trying to figure out how somebody thinks. And that's really the most important thing. Most sales skills can be trained. I generally don't believe in doing sales tests at all. You're screening for ability to listen, ask questions, and processing speed. Can I understand what's happening in the moment and move and pivot as I need to?
Sure. Okay. Last one. What's one thing that you wish you had known before you started out on your own with your consulting firm?
Oh, okay. So I read this book, like the $1 Million Consulting. I don't know if you have read this, but it's like Alan Weiss, I think is his name. And so I'm a huge reader. I like to read, listen to podcasts about things. And a lot of these books were talking about like contracts and things like that and how to make sure that you get paid and yada, yada. And so I started out doing things with contracts, projects and scoping and whatever. And I know in your world, Maari and John, that's really important. In my world, that has become way less important. I wish I knew that if you are doing more retainer-based work like I do, you don't need contracts. You can just ask to be paid up front because you're the little guy, typically speaking, and they're the big guy. And that's fair. And as long as everybody knows like that happens, then you consult, everybody's happy. And so I didn't know, I had to test and figure my way into that. When I was working with you, Maari, I was more on the contract scoping side of things. And eventually I was like, wait, this is not good for anybody. It's not helpful. It's hard. It gets stuck. And no.
It can become a barrier. Yeah.
Becomes a barrier. And so I wish I had known that earlier, but I got to discover that on my own. And now I can talk about it more intelligently.
Last thing, tell us a little bit about Audience Labs and if people want to reach out to you, how they can find you.
Oh, love it. So in a nutshell, with Audience Labs, we help people build and monetize global audiences. Usually we're working with CEOs, founders, motivational speakers, people who are the expert at whatever it is that they're doing and selling. And we help them figure out what's the character they're going to bring to social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, wherever it happens to be most strategically important. We help them figure out what their character is, what their content pillars are. And then we actually take them through how to write and construct scripts for those videos that they're going to create. And we give them feedback on a one-to-one basis and in a group setting so that they continue to hone their craft and get better over time. And then for one of our services, we have this cohort program where you meet with us 3 times a month, each individually, and we help you with the various elements of creating online viral videos. And then at the end of that quarter, we have everybody fly in and we do a shoot day where you're supposed to leave with 8 to 12 videos that you have shot during that time period. We've got location, we've got lighting set up. We do a couple of training sessions so you learn the different formats, skits, face to camera, stitches, all the various things that we're all familiar with on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, whatever. We teach those things and then train you on how to actually execute on them. We have this cohort program and it's based on Dr. Dinnan's curriculum at Duke, where he teaches building global audiences. He's one of our partners in this venture. We take what he has done and his own experience. We helped build him from 10,000 followers about this time last year to, I think he just crossed the 250 or 260,000 follower mark this year. And so we wanted to demonstrate that we could do that on a popular platform. We've got several amazing humans in that group with us that are motivational speakers. We got one guy who was traveling around with Oprah and did this thing called The Big Quiet, and now is looking to start building his audience to figure out what the next phase of his journey is going to be. And so we're working with some really fun, cool people. That's what we do on a day-to-day basis. What makes us a little bit different is not only do we do that, but we also consult on the business side of things. So like, how are we going to monetize once you build that audience? How are we going to automate that? What systems do we need to put in place so that you're not run by your business, you are running your business?
Nice. I know a small company that could use your help.
Get out of here.
Yeah.
I love that you have really designed a life and a business that is all those things that you love. Interesting people, passionate people who are building their own lives, and then using your unique skills and Aaron's skills and everybody else's skills all coming together to help them round out what they need to create in their business. I think that's a perfect example. And people are like, I don't know how to create a business doing these things. I'm like, just move forward with it. You created that business around all of those things that make you who you are and light you up. So I just think it's so cool to see what you built.
It's so fun. Can I leave the audience with one thing that I'd recommend that they read based on our conversation about callings today? There's this short story called Mojud, Mojud, The Man with the Inexplicable Life. The translation is by Idris Shah. It's a Sufi story, and it talks about a lot of the themes that we discussed here today and how listening to that inner voice and leaving convention and following it to each step and path in your calling leads you to ultimate enlightenment. And I think it's a really important story that has given me peace when I'm like, I don't know if this is the right thing and if I'm going in the right direction. So everybody read that. Mojud, The Man with the Inexplicable Life.
Great.
Awesome. What the link to that story?
Yeah. I'll grab a link and we'll put it in the show notes. Very cool. Thanks so much for sitting down with us today, Chris. This was a lot of fun. I definitely learned a few things about myself and about following our calling. It's always fun to chat and have a good time and joke around. Would love to get a beer or a coffee with you sometime and catch up. Just outside of it.
Yeah, we got to play some music, guys.
I know. I'll come and listen to you guys. You guys can perform for me.
We're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Yeah, we'll definitely do it. All right. We'll see you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Chris.
All right, we're back, and we have had a few days here to think about our conversation with Chris. Chris dropped a lot of really incredible knowledge on us, and as always, he's just such a fun person to talk to.
Yeah, I feel like Chris is one of those people that whenever we have conversations, I walk away feeling energized. I always feel like I'm like, wow, some people you talk with and you're drained, or you just feel like you're like, wow, I need to really sit with that with Chris. I just feel like I want to just get up and high five people.
Yeah, he definitely has that energy. He is in sales for a reason. There's no doubt about that. There are some people that are just born to be optimistic and to always look on the bright side and to see a no as a potential yes in the future, or at the very least, a learning opportunity. And I think Chris never passes up the chance to learn something new, which is another sort of really cool thing about him. He's just so observant.
Yeah.
I think,
He's our optimistic learner. That's his.
Yeah. Yeah. He's our optimistic learner. And it's good to have somebody like that, I think, in your corner, somebody that you can call every now and then just to remind you, even when you think, oh, I'm confused, I don't understand this, or I'm feeling a little down because maybe the clients have slowed down or whatever.
Definitely. We always talk about this with people who are starting a business, that you need to build your support team, and cheerleader is always one of them. You need that person you can call and genuinely will answer the phone with a smile. And Chris definitely has that vibe and that strength about him, that you can call him and know you can get direct information and genuine information, but he is going to be a cheerleader for you. So I think he's definitely that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good point. Everybody should find their cheerleader. All right, Maari. So what are you quitting?
What am I quitting? So one of the things we talked a little bit in the beginning about, he comes from a sales background, and that's where he started and where he's building from. And so we talked about how salespeople approach us. And I said, I get a million sales, emails, calls, like text messages, like all the different ways you can try to reach someone. I get those. And I just ignore them just because I get a ton. And I thought he said something that was really smart. I was like, man, you're such a better person than me. But of course, he can't answer them all either, but he uses those as opportunities to learn by paying attention to how he reacts. So if he gets a sales email, if he opens it, okay, well then why did I open it? Was the subject line interesting? Was there an interesting name, or what's the hook that kind of pulled me in? And then he files all that information away to use in the future. And I thought that was like such a great way to use an opportunity that you otherwise, like I typically will just dismiss and be like, delete, use it as an opportunity to learn, because he's a learner, and maybe get better at something in the future. So I'm going to try to use all those sales emails and calls and things I get, and maybe not pay attention to all of them, but try to notice some of the things and the techniques that they use. So hopefully I can use those in a genuine and unique way in the future. So I thought that was a good lesson that he taught me.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's just so easy to ignore all of the spam, all of the junk, and to just pass it off, especially now, because I feel like I'm getting more of it thanks to AI.
Yeah.
There's just a constant barrage now of AI generated emails, sales things that come in. So I'm going to quit doubting my intuition. Chris talked a little bit about trusting your intuition, especially in that sales process. When you feel something is a little off, maybe, or if you feel that there's a really good big opportunity here, either way, sometimes we tend to doubt that. If we feel like, oh, this might not be a good client fit for me, we go, oh, well, I'll take the job anyway, and then we'll see. And here I am 3 months later, they still haven't paid me. The work is all over the place. I'm not proud of it. So I would start trusting my intuition. At the same time, though, if you have that intuition of this gets me really excited, I want to do this, I'm super pumped to do it, I think you should trust that too.
Yeah, especially it's funny, like even after you work for however long we've worked, forever, and you get really good at identifying red flags, right? You're like, yes, like that is a red flag, and I'm not going to do this. And then you, every once in a while, you talk yourself into it. And then it almost, I would say 99.9% of the time comes back to be like, I should have listened to myself. And it's like, you don't know the opportunities. Like if you feel inclined to move forward in one direction and you don't do it, you'll think back about the opportunity missed. So it's like, you might as well just move forward and just give it a shot and try it. So it's listen to the ones that tell you no, listen to the ones that tell you yes, and trust that you're supposed to be directed in that way. I think that was like a good lesson.
Yes. And just to follow up on that a little, what I thought was interesting about what you said was, how often have you seen the red flags and your gut goes, oh, this is a bad idea, and you do it anyway? How often has your gut been wrong and you've been like, I'm really glad I took that project?
Yeah, no, never.
Never, not even once, right? And how long have we been doing this?
Oh, wow.
Every single time, if your gut says, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Whenever you look back, you go, yeah, that was not a good idea. And that right there should tell you something. It's not like it's 50% of the time it's right and 50% of the time it's wrong. I mean, it's batting 1,000. So just trust it. Trust it.
Yes, for sure. Yeah.
All right. So what about takeaways from our conversation here? What's your takeaway?
I mean, I think it's interesting. Like you and I have talked to a lot of people now. And there tends to be this through line of just pay attention. And I think Chris really talks a lot that about with people need to know themselves, and we're getting better and talking more about understanding what you want. But he talked a lot about how important that is in really finding your calling and understanding where you want to go. Is like you have to know who you are first to be able to pursue what you really want to do. And I think the older you get a little better at that too. It's what do I want to do? What do I not want to do? And we all have a tendency to hear a lot of what the world wants us to do. And sometimes that's not what we want to do. And the sooner we can say, yes, the world wants me to do blank, a dog, 2.5 kids, and a white picket fence, but I want to live in an Airstream and have raised alpacas or something. The sooner we can understand that, even if it doesn't align with what they want us to do, and that's okay, the better we can get at pursuing what we want to focus on and what our calling is. We change all the time, right? I'm not the same Maari I was when I was 12, 18, 24, and so on. So it's like sitting down with yourself once a year, quarterly, and just saying, am I doing what I want to be doing right now? Do I want to stop doing something and start doing something? I think is really important to do because we change throughout our lives. So even though ultimately we might be still following the same calling, the smaller parts of who we are and what we want to do will probably change throughout our life. So like checking in with yourself on a regular basis, I think is a good takeaway and a good like practice to put in place.
Absolutely. And we've heard other interviewees that we've talked to say basically the same thing. Check in with yourself on a regular basis and make sure that you're still feeling good about it. Yeah, I totally agree. I have this theory that people live different lives every 5 to 10 years. You have your early childhood development, and then you have your sort of teenage angsty years, preteen and teenage angsty years, and then you have your like young adult life, and then you have your sort of, I'm settling into adult life. Maybe I've bought a house or I've started a family or whatever, and everything shifts. And I don't know if it falls exactly on decades like 10, 20, 30, 40, but it definitely, your priorities shift as you move through life and you get different experiences.
Definitely. 100%.
Yeah. My takeaway is he nailed me, honestly, on the difference between a hobby and a passion. And it was really funny, but he used guitar as an example for me. And I can relate this to a lot of different things. This idea of we trivialize our interests and our passions if we call them a hobby, or if we call them something like, oh, that's just something I do on the side or whatever. That could be the opportunity. That could be the real calling. Just always seeking something new and interesting that I can learn. And I should start to look at those as opportunities to find a calling at this point in my life or at the next point in my life, instead of just trivializing it and saying, like, yeah, I like to play guitar and write songs, but I could never be a songwriter. But I can still say, I mean, that is my passion. That is something that I'm really into, and I want to maximize my ability to do that at whatever level. And so maybe it doesn't become a job or a way to make a living, but it can still be a calling in a different way. It can be a calling to just build a community of like-minded friends so that we all have a support system. Calling doesn't always have to be something that you turn into a profession. And that was another thing that we talked about too. It can be your passion, and it can be something that is outside of your profession in the way that you make money. And we have to be careful to make sure that we don't get those two tangled up.
I thought that was really good, because we do have a tendency sometimes to trivialize things that we don't think can turn into a big career. I love basketball, or like even in college, I went into college to be a writer. I loved poetry. And I was like, there's no way I can turn poetry into a career. And I didn't even pursue it. There are people who are poets who are and do that as a career, but I didn't pursue it because I was like, there's just no way that I can make enough money to live off of being a poet. And so I do feel like sometimes we shut that stuff off when we're young. Maybe it's our parents who are like, you can't make money on poetry, or you're never going to be a basketball star or whatever. And so sometimes we tend to shut that off early. And that's one thing I think, even thinking about my kids, is like, they might have something that I think is a small, fun hobby that could end up becoming a passion. It could end up becoming something bigger. And so I think it's important to pay attention to the roles that those things play in our lives. So I think it's interesting to look at that. I thought that conversation around hobbies versus passions was really fun.
Yeah. And I mean, speaking of poets, did Emily Dickinson make any money as a poet while she was alive?
No.
She made a little, but her father wouldn't let her publish her poetry under her own name. And there were a lot of different things there. And so after she passed, now we remember this great.
Yeah. Post-mortem famous.
Right. Yeah. And how many great artists have there been where they didn't get famous until after they passed? You've got your Van Goghs and so many other different examples of that. But if you build your body of work as your passion throughout your life, you never know who it might help in the future. And now we look back on those people with reverence, but at the time that they were struggling, but they continued to pursue their passion while they lived their life.
Yeah.
Well, that's all for today. And thanks again to Chris and to all of our listeners. We will be back in a few weeks with another episode. Until then, I'm John.
And I'm Maari.
And we're reminding you that winners can quit and quitters can win. This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute medical, legal, or financial advice. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the guest's own and do not necessarily represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Command Q or Uncompany.